Hello, Internet. Mike Byrne here from MMOBomb.com, and welcome to our 2021 wrap-up. It is that time of the year again. It is so hard to believe. Now, for those of you that have been following us for a long time, you know this year we switched from covering exclusively free-to-play games to also expanding out to cover all multiplayer games, whether they are free-to-play or not. So, we may have missed some things here in the news throughout the year, and if we did, put those in the comments below and we can chat about them. But now, it's time to kick off our top 10 multiplayer gaming news stories of 2021. Let's do it! Number 10, Battlefield 2042 fires blanks. And get used to this kind of entry on the list, that of a major game that was hyped to the moon and then fell flat upon launch. Kicking it off here is Battlefield 2042, one of the tentpole shooter franchises to launch late in the year. Now, while Halo Infinite has been fairly well received and Call of Duty Vanguard sort of just happened as it normally does, Battlefield 2042 has been pilloried from all angles, receiving by far the worst reception of the three. Every outlet we've looked at reports subpar review scores for the game. 34% positive on Steam, 2.3 out of 5 on Xbox Series X/S, and user scores ranging from a stunning 1.4 to 2.9 on Metacritic, depending on your platform of choice. Most complaints revolve around the quality given the price, especially for the special editions, the map design, and the new operator system that does away with the game's familiar classes. And then there's the bugs. There are so many that DICE once did a hotfix to correct 150 of them. Now, you could applaud the company for taking such swift action, but the fact that so many were allowed to sneak through into the launched version of the game even after open beta testing isn't a good sign and might be enough to relegate 2042 to the bottom tier of the Battlefield franchise. Number 9, Gamigo moves further from Tryon, canceling both Defiance and moving ArcAge. In 2018, Tryon Worlds was purchased by Gamigo. Now, at the time, Tryon had 5 games under its banner: Rift, Trove, Defiance, Atlas Reactor, and ArcAge. Now, fast forward 3 years later, and only 2 of those 5 games remain. Atlas Reactor didn't even make it a year under the Gamigo banner, shutting down in 2019. For some reason, though, it got a single-player sequel, Atlas Rogues, which performed just about as well as the original, and in other words, poorly. Defiance and its underwhelming offshoot, Defiance 2050, were shut down in March, but not before Gamigo co-opted its Twitter account to shill for everything else it offered. And ArcAge was recently handed off to Kakao Games. I wonder if the XL Games CEO was informed about that this time. Rift has been floundering now, due in large part to not seeing a new content update in years. Now, that's all supposed to change early next year, but it might be a case of too little too late. If that update doesn't light a fire under the game, don't be surprised if by this time next year, Trove is the only game with a speck of Tryon DNA left in it. Number 8, RuneScape celebrates 20 years and endures a major server outage. Alright, how about some mostly good news on this list? RuneScape celebrated its 2-decade anniversary this year, and Jagex spent all of 2021 celebrating the game and its players with one special activity after another. From time-traveling quests, to party hats and more party hats, to a mobile launch and even an illustrated book detailing the history of the game. 2021 could have been labeled the year of RuneScape. At the very least, Jagex set the standard for how game companies should commemorate their major milestones. Now, it wasn't all good news here, however. In March, the game suffered from what CEO Phil Mansell called the first time in 20 years we've had an issue we couldn't recover from in a few hours. About 3 hours of progress was rolled back in the game, and some players were locked out of their accounts for weeks. Everything was eventually resolved, with significant compensation handed out to those who were most severely affected. And with a little luck, RuneScape won't have a problem like this again for at least another 20 years. Number 7, that Lord of the Rings MMO is canceled. Now, we didn't mention the company's name in the header for this one because I'm not sure who really owned it at the end of the day when it finally suffered its ultimate demise. We first heard that Athlon Games, Company 1, a division of Leu Technologies, Company 2, was working on a free-to-play, massively multiplayer online video game based on The Lord of the Rings back in 2018. We had no details other than that, but given how long in the tooth The Lord of the Rings Online was getting, it was enough to get Tolkien heads, like Jason Winter, stoked. In July of 2019, it was reported that Amazon Games, company number 3, would be co-developing the game. Now, this was a natural fit, given the live-action Lord of the Rings series that Amazon was working on. Things got a little murkier, though, however, in December of last year when Tencent, company number 4, purchased Leu, company number 2, for $1.3 billion. The question on everyone's mind was, could these two mega corporations work together to deliver a game based on the most well-known fantasy IP? And the answer, as it turned out, was no, they couldn't. We learned about the project's canning in April, though word is that it was actually put on the shelf shortly after the Tencent acquisition. In fact, Tencent reportedly has little interest in anything Leu does or did in the video games realm. Maybe they were just interested in Leu's poultry supplier business. I don't know. Number 6, Roblox gets huge, but at what cost? A lot of game developers did surprisingly well during the pandemic, but none more so than Roblox. The company's value skyrocketed from $4 billion to $29.5 billion in 2020, a figure that then rose to $45 billion when it went public in March. You'd think that making all that money hand over fist is good, right? Well, perhaps we should have seen this coming, but when someone makes that much money that fast, it's almost a certainty that someone else is getting screwed. In this case, that appears to be the creators on Roblox, i.e., the ones actually making the content that brings in the money. A pair of scathing videos from YouTubers People Make Games laid bare Roblox's profit structure, which largely relies on children working long hours for pennies on the dollar, a system that would make 19th century coal barons jealous. At least Roblox's creators can't get black lung disease, I guess. In the coming year, it's hard to imagine that Roblox won't face further scrutiny for the actions alleged in those videos, as well as from other sources. Then again, we've seen Electronic Arts dodge and continue to dodge regulatory bodies for its questionable monetization practices for years with the barest and most transparent of platitudes. So maybe we won't go so far as to predict Roblox's empire will come crashing down in 2022. Or maybe we will. We haven't actually made our predictions for 2022 yet. Stay tuned. Number 5, crypto and NFTs invade gaming. In terms of bad things to happen to gaming in 2021, this entry might be at the top of a lot of people's lists. Paradoxically, it might also be at the top of some people's list of good things to happen in gaming in 2021. The first thing to remember is that video game companies are businesses. They want to make money. And one of the most tried and true ways to make money, especially when you don't have a lot to start with, is by hopping on a new and exciting seeming trend when it's small and hope it pays off big dividends in the long run. That seems to be the case with gaming's new infatuation with alternate forms of currency and investment, something we first got wind of nearly 4 years ago with blockchain CCG Nova Blitz. Developer Dragon Foundry was a bit before its time, however, as 2021 was the year that gaming companies large, like Nexon and Ubisoft, and small, embraced cryptocurrency and NFTs, hesitantly in some cases, and fully in others. The response to the trend from gamers, however, has been overwhelmingly negative. We're almost convinced that some of those responses are the reason why YouTube removed public viewing to the number of dislikes videos received. Still, a lot of people think owning your own digital assets is the future of gaming, and while they might not be wrong, the question will be whether there's any true value in owning anything from games that A, were never really popular, or B, shut down years ago, or C, both. Number 4, Magic Legends launches and then falls flat. Missed the mark is rapidly becoming one of the most tired phrases in the gaming business. It's usually trotted out as a euphemism for "we failed," but sounds a little less harsh and maybe makes the people involved in the project feel like they tried their best, but due to some random chance, a puff of wind knocking their arrow aside perhaps, they just didn't quite hit the target. Make no mistake though, Magic Legends failed. It failed harder than just about any other game in 2021, and it was entirely the fault of the people who designed it. Now, we won't blame Cryptic Studios for making it an ARPG when everyone was expecting a full-blown MMORPG, but nearly every design decision after that came with question marks. Most notable was the random hand mechanic, which we actually didn't find as awful as we thought we would, and a lot of folks were less generous than us on that front. The progression systems were also obtuse or needlessly difficult, the tutorial area was too long, the cash shop was criticized, of course. Basically, there wasn't much anyone said they actually liked about the game. All this led to, unsurprisingly, the death of the game, but it happened in a more rapid time frame than anyone could have predicted. The shutdown was announced in June, just 3 months after the game became publicly available, ostensibly in an open beta, because it missed the mark. And by the way, it didn't make enough money. In open beta. Now, it seems like gamers weren't the only ones with unrealistic expectations here, but hey, at least you got some free stuff in other Cryptic Studios' Perfect World games, I guess? Number 3, Apple and Epic keep on fighting. We're as tired of writing about this as you are likely of reading it. So, here's the quick version. Epic still doesn't want to pay Apple to use the App Store. As the case was heard, we found out a lot of interesting things about all the money Fortnite makes. The judge ruled that the App Store has to allow devs to link out to alternate payment methods. Apple said, that's going to take too long, and the judge disagreed. But then other judges didn't. Both companies are appealing the ruling still. Bottom line, Fortnite still isn't on the App Store and likely won't be for some time. We'll let you know when things change or anything else of value comes out of this whole affair, but that's not likely to happen anytime soon. Number 2, New World launches to great fanfare, but bleeds players like a sieve. Maybe it wasn't quite as disastrous as Magic Legends, right? But the saga of New World's journey is nearly as depressing. And hey, 3 months after launch, full launch, mind you, not any open betas, it doesn't seem to be in danger of shutting down, so that's a good thing. That's about the only thing, though, that hasn't gone wrong for Amazon Games' latest foray into the multiplayer gaming world. The first, Breakaway, never made it out of testing, while the second, Crucible, did, and then went back into testing, and then was shut down. To say that New World had some high expectations, not only from fans, but from Amazon itself, but also had a lot of question marks around it, would be a huge understatement. Early on, things seemed to be going rather smoothly. There were typical MMO launch day woes, set those aside, yes, there were long queues, but nothing seasoned players weren't used to. Before long, though, bigger issues surfaced. Bugs were expected, even severe ones, but it was the exploits, and the exploits, and the exploits, and the exploits, and the exploits that kept grabbing the headlines. Even taking unintended gameplay out of the equation, there have been plenty of intentional design choices that have left players feeling miffed. Our personal list includes not being able to do instance PvP until you hit max level or participate in wars unless you're chosen to do so. And then there's all the running. Those were issues at launch, and even months later, the dev team continues to make decisions that irritate players, like endgame gear scaling, that they've thankfully decided to reverse course on a bit. There are some good points to the game, but the overall package adds up to a game that deservedly has a mixed rating on Steam and has seen its average player count drop by about 75% since its initial launch. That's still good enough to be a top 10 game, but given the game's tremendous development cost, rumored to be in about the $500 million range, anything less than number 1 might just be viewed by Amazon as a disappointment. Number 1, Activision and Bobby Kotick slammed from multiple angles with serious harassment and discrimination allegations. Where to begin when describing Activision Blizzard's fall in 2021? Perhaps it's best to start before everything really went downhill, when CEO Bobby Kotick had to work overtime in June making phone calls just to ensure his exorbitant paycheck stood firm. Maybe the lack of faith that many investors had in him should have been seen as a sign of what was to come. Just a month later, California's Department of Fair and Equal Housing filed a suit against the company following a 2-year investigation that found evidence of multiple cases of sexual harassment, discrimination, and more over the previous decade. Activision Blizzard immediately came out on the defensive, denying the substance of the report, only to have multiple employees, current and former, come forward to corroborate its findings. Things only went downhill from there, though, as the president of Blizzard, J. Allen Brack, fell on his sword and resigned his position to be replaced by 2 people, one of them a woman, Jen O'Neill, who herself resigned a few months later when she felt she was being treated unfairly. Toss in an investigation by the SEC, a controversial settlement with the EEOC, a bunch more unpleasant stories, including many painting Bobby Kotick himself as the perpetrator of harassment, and it all added up to probably the worst year that anyone could have imagined for the company, its employees, and its fans. In the wake of all of that, Blizzard struggled with the content of its actual games, making major changes to World of Warcraft and Overwatch to either reduce overtly sexual content or remove named offenders. Hotly anticipated upcoming titles Diablo 4 and Overwatch 2 were postponed until 2023, and BlizzCon was, understandably, canceled. As for what all of this means for the future of Activision Blizzard, Bobby Kotick, and everyone else, painful as it's been to endure, we're a little bit optimistic that good, solid change will come of all of it. Long postponed attempts at unionization in the gaming industry are proceeding apace despite Activision's obvious desire to squash that, and Kotick is facing serious pressure from a number of important people to resign. Whether he will or not is still an open question and is tied heavily into the performance of the company's stock, but we've never seen anything quite like this in the gaming industry. We'd say that we'd prefer never to see it again, but sometimes it's a necessary evil to endure so that things can get better in the long term. Well, that's our list of the top 10 multiplayer gaming news stories of 2021. What's your top news? Let us know in the comments below, and of course, make sure you click like, click subscribe, and come on over to mmobomb.com so you can check out all the videos, shows, podcasts, and more that we're running, covering everything multiplayer gaming related. Until next time, gang, this is Mike Burns saying stay safe, and we'll see you on the servers.